I'm Ann Vaughn, for those of you whom I've not met. And before we get started, I just wanted to say a quick word about the team that puts all this together, the focus area committee chairs, led by Sharon Dennis, our grants chair, and also by Latina and Megan Van Orden, who are our finance committee chairs. And this is truly a team, and it's an unbelievably awesome working team. And one of the things you might not know is that they get together every week during the grant review process to discuss glitches, to celebrate things that are going well, but just to regroup and come together. And they have also worked behind the scenes during the summer, especially Sharon, but the grants team as well, to really think about how things worked last year, to take into account feedback from members who participated last year, and to incorporate all of that into revisions for this year. And it's just, I can't emphasize what a thoughtful group of women this is. So you're all in great hands. And at the top here, setting the tone, is Sharon Dennis. So I will turn it over to her, who does an absolutely fantastic job.
Thank you, Ann. You're too sweet. Well, we can go. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many faces, new faces, returning faces. This is really wonderful. This is our third year of our training. So I'm happy to see some people returning because, like Ann said, we switch it up every year. We spend a lot of time listening to your comments over the past year, and I think you'll see that the application scoring rubric process really reflects your comments from last year. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so today's agenda, we're going to cover the grant review process as well as the timeline. We'll look at the ethics that we use as part of our process and the guidelines for all of our work. We'll review the roles of women within the committees, and we'll talk about the evaluation criteria. You'll get a little peek at the Good Grants platform, and we'll learn more about that in our committee level meetings next week. We're also going to talk a little bit about unconscious bias towards the end of the training, and leave plenty of time for your questions and answers. And I always say, every question, no bad question. If you have a question, please ask it. If you're wondering, somebody else is probably wondering as well. So go ahead and let us know what they are. Okay, I wanted to introduce you to the team. And so, as you know, I'm Sharon Dennis. I'm the chair of the grants team. Our finance co-chairs are Latina Fauconnier and Megan Van Orden. We were going to try to spotlight them. I don't know if that's happening. Leading our Arts and Culture Committee is Mary Cohen. Returning as our education chair this year is Dorothy Durden. Health and Wellness is Janelle Haskell. Sorry, I see I'm going too quickly. I apologize. Environment, I'm also the chair of the Environment Committee. And we have a new chair of our Family Committee this year, who is Mary Ellen Taylor, who has participated in previous years and is taking over as chair this year. So it's a wonderful group of women, as Ann said. We learn so much from each other, and it's just, it's a pleasure to work with all of you. Okay. Let's jump into the grant review timeline. Latina actually developed this graphic to help sort of visually portray what we're doing when throughout the early months of the winter through late spring. And I love it because you can look at this and have a sense, if you're in a focus area committee, when you're going to have your sort of busy period. If you're on the finance committee, you'll see that you have in round 2 a different period of time in which you're busy. And then in our third round, the finance committee and the FACs all come together and work together to determine our finalists. And of course, in June, we'll have our Meet the Finalists event and our annual meeting. So this gives you a brief overview of what we're looking at this year. So let's talk about the first round of grant review. Basically, there are 4 actions that are happening. So number 1, you will be asked to accept an invitation to the Good Grants platform, which is the software that we're using for applications as well as scoring. Then you will read and score applications. We're going to talk about all of this in a little more detail, but basically that is a part of the process that you will do on your own, and then come together after that period of time as a full committee. And I think many of you have actually been introduced to your committee members this week through an email from your chairs. If you haven't heard from your chair yet, you will in the next couple of days. But the committee level discussions is really where the real work happens. It's a fascinating process. We learn about these fantastic organizations doing amazing work, and we learn so much from each other. You know, I think any single person can read an application and have a particular viewpoint, but when you open it up to a whole committee of women with various viewpoints, various experiences, the level of discourse is just fascinating. And through the committee work, you will take the total number of applications that you have, and hard to say what that will be at this point in time because the deadline isn't for another couple of weeks, but you will be ultimately winnowing that down to 3 applicants who will move forward for further review. So it's a fascinating part of the process. You'll be very much involved with who these organizations are, what they're doing, and just getting to know each other and learning a lot from each other. Oops. So let's talk a little bit about the grant review roles. Within your committees, your chair will assign applications to you as either a lead reader or secondary reader. And the idea behind this is that some of the committees, probably most of the committees, will receive quite a number of applications. And we don't want to, can whoever is not muted, mute themselves, please. So the idea being that you might have a large number of applications in your committee, which you're going to all discuss, determine who the strongest candidates are, and move on. Not everyone will have the time to read every single application that comes in. That's why we have designated a lead reader for every application, as well as secondary readers. These are the people who will come to the committee and have the responsibility to fully portray everything in the application that's important for your review. And when that person is done presenting the overview of the application, you should feel like you have enough information to figure out the merits of that application versus another application. So we've worked hard creating a lead reader guide. We have a lot of guidance for all of this so that we're hoping that you're capturing all of the key information to understand the merits of every single application within your committee. Next. Okay, so we have some simple guidelines for grant review. They're pretty straightforward. Be objective, be respectful of the views of your fellow committee members, set realistic expectations, focus on the strongest initiative, even if it's not your personal favorite, and importantly, don't contact grant applicants even if you have questions. Okay, there's this point in the process where we will be in contact, but that's done by the chairs. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about grant scoring. One of the things that we say when we ask for people to sign up for a focus area is that there's no experience needed. And yet we run a very sophisticated grant review process, in my humble opinion. And part of the reason why we are able to do that is that the grants team, Anne alluded to this earlier, we spent a lot of time coming up with a scoring rubric to help guide you as you go through answers on each of these applications. The basic idea is that as you go through each application, if you're a lead reader or secondary reader, you'll be awarding a numeric score for each answer on the application. We're hoping that in this way, what we've seen in the past is you get a very good sense, not a definitive sense, but a good sense of, you know, the relative merits of applications within your committee. So let's go on to the next slide. I love this. Overall, this proposal presents, this is what we're looking for. Overall, this proposal presents a program that would appeal to our full membership, exemplifies our mission and values, and based upon all of the information presented, has every chance of succeeding and leading to lasting change. So in other words, as we're looking at grants and reviewing them, we're not necessarily just looking for the boldest, most amazing idea out there, because in reality, anyone could promise us the stars. What we have to do is look further and determine, you know, is the program that they're suggesting something that is closely in line with our mission and values? Does the organization have the wherewithal, the stability, the prior experience to handle a grant of this size? If we pick this particular proposal to move forward to the full membership, is it the sort of proposal that has widespread appeal throughout all sorts of audiences? So that's what we're aiming to do with our grant review. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the software that we use for all aspects of grant review. The platform we're using is called Good Grants. We are using it in part because we used it last year with great success. I think that those of you who are returning will agree that it was very easy to use. And importantly, it's an affordable option for us. So the thing to know about Good Grants is if you're a newcomer, you will be receiving an invitation from Good Grants to access the applications. That will not be coming from the chair of your committee. It will be coming from Good Grants. So be on the lookout for that. And please don't think that that's something like spam and delete it. If you're a returning reviewer, you're actually going to be required to sign into your old account from last year. Now, most of you will probably have forgotten your password from last year. It's easy to just hit the forgot password button, and they will let you set yourself a new password, and then you can go right back into your grant review platform. We're going to talk about all of this in much greater detail next week at the committee level meetings, and we'll do a little hands-on walkthrough with Good Grants. But I can tell you that I know that there's a lot of us who are not tech savvy, and we've found Good Grants to be extremely easy to use. So the next slide talks about grant review using the scoring rubric. And this is basically a more readable version of what was on the previous slide on the right-hand side, which was basically what you're going to see in the scoring rubric as you go through and read the application. So what we've tried to do is make it easy for you to award a score, even though scoring is itself subjective in nature. So in other words, in this case where we're saying in the needs statement, the proposal clearly identifies an unmet social or economic need that is critical to be addressed at this time. A score of 0 might be somebody who either totally ignores the question or provides information about a need that doesn't seem remotely critical or not timely. An adequate score of number 2, maybe you've got some information that would suggest that this need is a significant need, maybe it's not significant, maybe it's not timely, or maybe they haven't presented quite enough evidence to convince you that this is an urgent matter. Whereas the exemplary need statements will absolutely stand out for you. You'll see that the writer has provided data to show the need. They have underscored, why this is an urgent issue, and how critical it is that we address it now. I can tell you, for example, last year, the organization that took home the $100,000 grant, Citygate, did a wonderful job of talking about the need of children in Ward 8 who were so far behind in their reading that they were grade levels behind in reading proficiency, and that this had only been made worse by COVID. So the need was absolutely clearly identified and clearly urgent. So that sort of sums up essentially what we're going to be doing in round 1 of grant review. I'm going to turn it over to Megan to go through the next steps of the process.
Thank you, Sharon. Hello, everyone. So round 2, I'm assuming everyone can hear me, but if not, wave or something. But so the second step is round 2, which is the finance review. And we provide that feedback to the focus area committees. And so what we wanted to do today is to provide a high-level summary of what the finance review committee does, why it's important, and let everyone know, those of you who have joined the Finance Review Committee, you'll be getting an invitation for a training in due course, along with a separate scoring rubric that gets used during this time. And so I think it's important to first talk about what we'll be doing. And unlike, it's a little bit different than last year, we will be doing an initial run. Once all the applications come in, we'll be looking at the documents that have been submitted as part of the applications to make sure, at least at the onset, there's a full package from a financial statement perspective. And so that'll be done kind of before these get allocated, just to make sure that as they're going through the focus area committees, we know that they have sufficient financial data within there to continue through the process. But then when it gets to the Finance Review Committee, really what we're doing is we're going to be looking at the financial data and the proposal budgets. We'll be looking at it from a broad perspective, but in essence, we've requested that each of the applicants provide us with 3 years of financial data. That includes audited or reviewed financial statements and their 1099. And in addition to that, as part of their application, they provide a project budget and narrative to support that budget. And so in looking at these documents, we'll be looking for trends and metrics just to get an idea and sense for the financial stability of the organization. Through the review, we may have some questions, and a little bit different from last year for those of you who may have been on the committee or was involved in some of the site visits. We're going to try to hold separate meetings with the finance department to ask some of the finance questions as they arise, because we often find that they may not have been at the table or involved in the grant submission process. And so they're usually the best people, though, to answer any of the financial questions that we may have. And after that, we'll get to the point where we'll make an assessment from a financial concerns or health or concerns perspective. And then we'll report back to the focus areas committees and attend the site visits with them as appropriate. And so let's maybe take a deeper dive here. And so really what are we going to be thinking about? So as I mentioned, as part of the application, applicants are required to submit audited or reviewed financial statements, a proposal budget, and narrative supporting that budget. And so some of the things that we'll be looking at are there diverse revenue sources? So do they have more than one source of income? Do they look like the reliable sources looking out into the future? Are there any concerns from a liquidity perspective? So do they have enough revenues coming in to meet the operating needs of the organization? And do they have, and in our review, are we seeing any sort of concerns from a financial governance perspective, such as segregation of duties, appropriate oversight, and the like? And so as part of this evaluation, we'll be looking to see if we identify any red flags that we'll then discuss with the finance team at the applicant. So some red flags may be that the organization is currently running a deficit, or maybe because of the pandemic, and I know we've been in the pandemic for a few years now, but maybe when looking back in the past 3 years, we've seen some changes and stark declines that happened in maybe 2020, 2021, and has that caused any concerns in terms of the viability of the organization? Have we seen any other changes in the revenue sources and potential vulnerabilities that may exist? And as I mentioned, we look for, and to be able to be eligible for the grant, entities are required to have audited or reviewed financial statements. And so has this third party who's performed procedures more extensive than what we are doing, have they raised any concerns in their auditor's report that we may need to discuss with others? And so those were some red flags, but when we take a step back and look at the budget, so the budget that's supporting the project, we're really looking for it from a completeness perspective. Is there alignment between the narrative and the actual budget? Do we see other sources of funding? And we also look at it from a operating cost perspective. So how much of our dollars as part of their program budget would be going towards operating costs or actually funding the program itself? We generally have a rule that operating costs can't exceed 15% of the budget. And so with all this information that the Finance Review Committee gets, we then rank each of the applicants with certify with no concerns. So maybe we have 1 or 2 questions, but really no concerns about the financial stability of the organization. Certify with questions, so that's yellow light. So there's some concerns, but we believe it's easy to resolve, hopefully through the conversation we'll have with the finance department. And lastly, unable to certify. And this is red light. I think it's important to note that we will not give the red light or unable to certify. It's unless we really feel it's necessary. It's a very high bar to get there. And so if for some reason the Finance Review Committee is unable to certify an applicant, it won't move forward to the next round. So it's just important for everyone to understand that that's not a decision we would be taking lightly, and it is based on a thoughtful review of the information that has been provided and discussion amongst the committee members. And so why is this all important? I think just going back to the purpose of the financial review is we will be granting one of these applicants a large grant of $100,000. And it's important to us and to all of our members that we do this review to ensure that when we are giving this money, the organization is capable and at a point in its maturity to be able to handle a grant of that size, and that they have appropriate controls in place to execute against its plan. So I am going to pause for one moment to just make sure and see if Latina, the co-chair, had anything she'd like to add to this section before we continue to move on.
Great job, Megan. I think you covered all the key points. Nothing additional on my end.
All right, lovely.
Can I ask a question from the floor?
Sure.
Hi, it's Sally Greenberg. I'm a new member, and I was particularly interested in reviewing the financial situation with the applicants. Are most of our applicants nonprofit organizations?
They're all nonprofit organizations.
They're all nonprofits.
Correct.
So a couple of questions. Do you require them to have filed a 990?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't see it mentioned here because for our purposes, whenever we're looking at the validity of an organization, I find a number of organizations that don't have a 990 up for one reason or another, and you really that you really find out a lot of very useful information by looking at a 990. I also think it's very useful, and maybe we can do this offline. It doesn't have to be here, but very useful to have organizations that have that information on their website. I think that's considered a best practice, so that you don't have to go to GuideStar to look at what their financials are.
We do require that information to be provided in the application. So it
Okay.
is part of the package that they must submit. It's always nice when they have it on the website, but they do have to submit it to us, even if it's not posted.
Okay, and is there anything about board giving? Because they are nonprofits, is there any requirement that there be like 100% board giving or close to that?
That is not part of our current analysis. We do not have a requirement for board giving. We do look at the board makeup and the involvement of the board in the program that they're submitting for their proposal, but we do not stipulate how the organization directs its members to contribute.
Okay, yeah, the only reason I ask is because we're always told if you want to go to foundations or others to get money, you really have to show that your board has skin in the game. And as a result, we're constantly telling our board, and it's mostly proves, true, that there is an expectation that the board of directors of a nonprofit is going to be giving and supporting the nonprofit. So I'm just throwing it out there. But I think these are great items to put on the list. All of your really strong due diligence on the financials is really impressive. And I think, really important.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can
And
I ask a follow-up question?
sure, and can I just say, once again, sorry, I'm butting in, this is Ann Vaughn, that those kinds of questions and comments have guided us all the way through. So thanks, Sally, and please, don't hold back with questions or things you don't understand. We still have a bit more of the presentation, but if this is about finance, please, please ask questions.
I have a very quick question. I'm Ronna Freiberg. I'm a returning member, so I have been through this process before, but I always find the training to be very helpful. On the finances, given the amount of scrutiny and the amount of attention that is applied by the finance committee, I'm never sure how much time we, as the lead readers in the FACs, should focus on looking at the finance, because we do get the budget and we do have an opportunity to look at the financials. What's your guidance on that? Should we be getting very far into that?
That's a great question, Rona. So what we ask the focus area committees is to look at the application as a whole. We will be going through a process to ensure completeness from the onset. I know last year we had some challenges with some of the financial information that was provided was not accurate, was not what we were requested, and that wasn't identified until later in the process. We've moved that forward. So by the time the applications go to the focus area committees, there will already be a review to ensure that the right level of information is included in the application. The focus area committees are going to look at more like the budget in the context of the proposal. Does it, sort of make sense? But the finance committee will also be doing a more robust analysis on the budget. It is included as part of our scoring rubric. So we are not asking the focus area committees to weigh in specifically on the budget, but to understand it in the context of the narrative and to make sure that it all sort of holds together in the broad scheme of the application.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Certainly.
Great.
Any other questions? While we're great.
All right. So now that round 2 is done, I think we're going back to Sharon to talk to round 3.
Great. Okay, so in round 3, we will be offering site visits to the organizations that have made it through the FAC review and the Finance Committee review. This year, we are planning to offer in-person site visits. I know that's a change from in the past. We've only ever done these during COVID, but we're hoping this year that we will be able to offer in-person site visits. We think that the site visit process itself, for those of you who are new to grant review, is a wonderful opportunity to get beyond, you know, the words on the paper and get a good sense of the people and the place. And it's just a wonderful way to round out your understanding of the applications. And we feel like if we can do those in person, even more so. So the Finance Committee folks will be able to participate in those, as well as the FAC members. Once the site visits are together, the committees will come together once again, as well as the Finance Committee folks who participated in the review of those applicants. And you will have the hard task of selecting a single finalist who will then be moving forward to represent your committee to the full membership. The finalists we like to keep as a surprise for our members. So Meet the Finalists is a fun event for our members to see the wonderful work of the various organizations that we've been studying. And then of course it's, you know, wow, these are our finalists, which is great. Let's see, I know that in-person site visits are going to be harder for some of us, and it's going to take more planning than the virtual site visits we've done in the past. So if you have specific questions about that, we can talk about that during the Q&A as well. We discussed it quite a bit as a grant review team and decided this is the year we'll give it a go. So I think that we have taken you through a little bit of round 1, round 2, and round 3 of the grant review process. Again, you'll have an opportunity to ask more specific questions after we go through a little bit of unconscious bias training. But as you see, we have a very busy schedule coming up, but I know that the work is extremely enriching. So do not fear. It will be a lot of fun. It'll be fascinating. You're going to meet each other. We've all learned so much from the other women on our committees. It's a really wonderful experience to build these relationships and learn from each other. So that's the timeline in a nutshell. Next steps. So, you will be meeting with your chairs, committee level meetings next week. We will go over the various issues such as, I think we missed the slide on conflict of interest. No, I don't remember. But
It was the first slide. It was one of the first slides.
Oh, okay. So we'll talk about that in committee. We just want to make sure that the process is fair and transparent for all. The committee chairs have, some of us have already established our meeting times, and those were listed when you signed up for FAC. Others will be doing polling of all the members of the committee to find out what dates and times work best for people. I will say that we will only be having meetings in the evenings or basically outside of regular work hours, so that the idea being that even if you have a full-time job, you can participate in the grant review process. You'll receive your access to applications and good grants coming up. You'll review and evaluate your assigned applications. You'll attend the round 1 committee review meetings, and then of course decide on applications to move forward to round 2 finance review. So Latina is going to take us through a little bit of training on unconscious bias in the context of grant making.
Thanks, Sharon. So in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions. I just want to briefly talk about, maybe I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Latina Ficania, Impact 100 DC Vice President and Finance Committee Co-Chair. As Sharon was talking earlier about our process for reviewing applications and expectations for meetings, we wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about the presence of unconscious bias and how it presents itself in the grant making process, because it is integral with what we do. We have a very subjective process that requires a committee to evaluate each application on its merit, and then ultimately to compare them to decide which applications we're going to move forward. And in doing so, we show up, we bring our experiences, we bring our perspectives, we bring all of those things to the table when we discuss the merits of each application. And so it's important that as we're doing so, that we are mindful that there is the potential for bias in this process. And so as we bring more awareness to that situation, we hope that it gives us the tools to then be able to check ourselves and think about, are we being as rational and thoughtful in the decisions that we're making, so that we, at the end of the day, have a well thought through, minimized process around where there's the potential for bias throughout our decision-making process. And so we do have a quick video that we want to play. I think it touches on some of the science behind our brains, how our brains work, why there is bias, regardless of what we do to, like, as fair as we think we may be being, the potential for bias always exists in us as human beings. And so I want to play this video to introduce the topic, and then we'll spend a few minutes talking about some specific areas that are more relevant to our process at Impact, as well as grant making in general. So Megan, if you can play the video.
Whoop.
Megan, I can't hear.
Voice.
I don't know if anybody else.
There's no volume.
Can't hear.
Okay, let me try it again.
Yeah, can you just make sure that
because of our potential.
There we go.
Perfect.
How do you decide who makes the team? Who gets an opportunity and who gets cut? We want to believe that we think rationally and objectively, that all of our motivations are pure and free from biases, but we know that's not always the case because of our potential blind spots. Blind spots, or unconscious biases, are mental shortcuts that help us make sense of the millions of pieces of data we take in each day. They can potentially influence our decisions. Not all biases are bad. It's normal to have a favorite sports team or food, or prefer being around your own family. Having a bias doesn't always mean you're against something. In fact, the halo effect means exactly the opposite. It's when you favor a person based on a positive first impression. In your mind, they can do no wrong, even when they prove otherwise. And assuming someone will be great at absolutely everything can actually end up setting them up for failure. The Horns effect happens when someone is defined by a negative first impression. No matter what they do, they can't shake it. Halo and horns often carry over into other areas and color all the ways we see and experience them. The halo and horns effects can also be reinforced by confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we look for evidence that supports our beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. Let's take a little test. What rule defines this number sequence? Now that you've got your rule in mind, can you come up with a series of numbers that also fit that rule? What about these? Which sequences fit? If you said 20, 22, 24, you'd be wrong. Actually, all of them fit. The simple rule was that the numbers got bigger. It's likely that your unconscious mind quickly saw a pattern of even numbers that go up by 2, and that narrowed your thinking. This shows that confirmation bias can rob us of other possible solutions. Numerous studies have shown that people are more likely to seek out information that confirms a belief and disregard information that doesn't. One study found that people spent over 36% more time reading articles that confirm their beliefs. In the business world, this habit could end up squashing innovation before it starts. So what can we do when we're wired to hang on to halo horns and pay more attention to things that confirm our beliefs? How can we counteract our unconscious bias? The first step is to be open. Try not to let one shining moment or one speed bump sway your opinion forever. Make sure you look at all the evidence objectively. Play your own devil's advocate and seek out contradictory views. And slow down your thinking. Ask questions and bring in other perspectives to expand your point of view. When we recognize our blind spots, that's when we can get beyond halo and horns. That's when we can overcome confirmation bias. And that's when we can see people for who they are and who they can become.
So that video just kind of touches on some of the most common forms of unconscious bias. So they talked about halo and horns effect, confirmation bias. So how we may see that play out in the grant making process is an example of horns bias might be, if I had an experience with a particular nonprofit organization and that wasn't particularly a great experience, that may cloud my judgment to believe that even, new programs or proposals that they put forward would be similarly disorganized and may not, I may not want to give them the benefit of the doubt and look at their current proposal on a standalone basis. That prior experience may make it hard for me to overcome, that prior belief that the organization is either unprepared or, disorganized, or that, maybe the director of the program, you didn't have a great experience with them. So all of those things may, show up in how I think about a current program. Or I might have the exact same opposite experience with an organization and have glowing reviews for them and think that, they are amazing. So anything that they do is going to be amazing, even if their proposal is less than stellar. I may want to give them the benefit of the doubt and sort of push them forward, just given my prior experience with them. I might have confirmation bias in that if in the example of a proposal where I didn't particularly have a great experience, I might identify, typos or issues, misspellings, things like that in their application as just further evidence of how disorganized that organization is. Things like that. We really have to be mindful, especially when we look at the types of organizations that we're asking to apply. We're looking for organizations that have between a $300,000 and a $5 million budget. That could be a wide range of organizations, and the level of presentation or polish that we may see in the applications may also color our perspective or view on that application. Organizations that have a higher budget may be better positioned to hire grant writers that use a lot of really well polished language and have everything sort of buttoned down from I's dotted and T's crossed. But there may be another proposal that may not be written as strong, but has a really, really strong, program and has a really great idea. And so we are really asking that we focus on, our mission and our vision, and that we highlight those organizations that we look for. One of the ways in which we've done that, or one of the ways in which we are trying to empower our focus area committees to do that, is to heavily leverage the scoring rubric. The rubric was built through, based on prioritizing our, our mission and our vision and those things that we really do want to hold forward. So as we're looking at applications, as we're looking at the rubric, being mindful of that when we're filling it out and scoring the rubrics. If we read a proposal and have sort of an immediate gut reaction, we may need to slow down, reassess, ask ourselves, why are we, thinking the way we're thinking, or why is that our view? And then in our conversations that we're having with the focus area committees, we need to respect each other's perspectives and our points of views. And that gives us a good opportunity to challenge our assumptions. If I'm petitioning really hard for a proposal and it just doesn't seem like the merit's there, that might be a good opportunity for the committee to say, Latina, does that, are we really focusing on the rubric here? Is there something else behind why you feel so strongly about this organization? And we should really keep what happens in the focus area committee discussions confidential. It's a safe space to be able to have those conversations, challenge our assumptions. If we go in just knowing that we want the best outcomes, we want to find the best proposals to put forward to the broader membership to vote for, then I think starting from a place of positive intent will help us realize that we're just here all hoping to get to a good resolution. And I think we've had good success in the past with the way our committees have run. This really hasn't been an issue, but it has been something that we've been talking about from the beginning. And I do think that as we continue to keep this front of mind and challenge our assumptions, we've continued to have really, really amazing organizations put forward as our finalist. So Megan, if you can go to the last slide. I always like this slide because I think it's just a good illustrative example of sort of the difference between equity and equality. We think of giving everybody the same thing as being a good thing, and that's sort of what equality sets out to do. But we have to recognize that different people, different organizations have different needs. And so as we're thinking about the proposals, really understanding what organizations are using that equity lens will be important to ensure that they've thought about their target audience, that they've thought about what voices that they've brought into the table as they've developed their programs, as they've handed out resources. Those are the things that are going to make a real lasting impact. And that's part of what we are really setting out to do. So if we go to our next and final slide on unconscious bias, we do have some additional resources. If you are really wanting to get more information, you want to have a broader perspective beyond what we've talked about here. This will continue to be echoed in the focus area committees as well. But we did want to provide access to some of these resources that we use to put these materials together. We do also have some information available on our Impact 100 DC website. You will get a copy of the slides following the presentation, following tonight's meeting. So all of this will be available, and the chairs are available to answer questions as well as at the end of this. So that's all I wanted to cover on unconscious bias. I think that brings us to Q&A. Yes. I'll turn it back over to you, Sharon, for Q&A.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let's just open the floor to questions. Let's see. I think you can either raise your hand. Raising your hand is hard with gallery view because there's so many of you. Maybe if you just want to speak up with a question, go right ahead.
Oh, well, I'd love to speak up. I found the whole information about unconscious bias fascinating. I've never come across it before, and because I haven't done this, it was really interesting. I have a question going way back to the beginning of the process. How do we solicit the applications? I've never really heard about that, I don't think.
Yeah, well, we do have an extensive mail list of nonprofits that fit our general criteria. And so they're notified well in advance of the application opening. We also offer training. I think the training this year was in December. So we, for any nonprofit that's interested in applying for our grant, we have a very full training which walks them through eligibility criteria, what we're looking for in the application. We've tried to make the process as open, transparent, fair as we possibly can to the nonprofits. That said, if people have ideas about other nonprofits who should be on our list and they're not, please do let me know.
Do you have a list that you give to the members to know who you send out the application?
We don't, I haven't given that to the members. We've got a mail list with about 300 addresses on it.
Yeah.
300 or more. But if you have a specific organization that you're wondering whether they're on our list.
Yeah,
just
okay,
go ahead and
good.
let me know. Yeah.
Okay, sure. All right.
I should also say that we have partners, for example, in Montgomery County, there's an organization called Nonprofit Montgomery, and they basically are a capacity building organization, and they have about, well, they have several hundred members themselves. And
Wow.
so they always advertise our grant. It's advertised through other mechanisms. This year, we were at the Catalog for Philanthropy event.
I know that one. Yes.
So there are various, we send out postcards. We try really hard, but we're always open to new ideas.
Yeah, no, thank you. Of course you do. And I just never had that, that part of the process. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, sorry, I can't turn on my camera. I tried, but I'm in the office. I can't figure it out. So this is Dana. I'm new this year. So I just was wondering, you may have said it, I might have missed it, but with the primary and the secondary readers, can you read the other applications that are assigned to your group, even if you're not assigned to them? Or do you really just want us to read the one or whatever we're assigned to?
Yes, you're welcome to read all of the applications in your committee, but we are asking the scorers, the lead reader and the secondary readers, to be the scorers on the scoring rubric. And again, if there's specific questions about this, we can also discuss those on the committee level as well. But yeah, if you have the capacity to read every application in your committee, that's wonderful. I hope people can do that, because you'll become familiar with so many wonderful organizations. I see Joan DePonte is on this call. And Joan, I love that you always say, having worked in the nonprofit community for so long, you sort of thought you knew all the players. I used to feel the same. And then we started this process, and there's so many organizations we have never heard from before, but they're doing fantastic work. And it's just, it's a wonderful process. Other questions? Marilyn? You're on mute.
Did I hear Latina say that we will get a copy of all these slides?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and the video will also, the recording will be available if you want to re-listen to the whole thing.
Anyone else?
If I may, just a clarification, will the financials of the prior 3 years of functioning of each applicant be available along with their proposal, right? It's not kept separate from the proposal and the budget details of what they're asking. We will be able to review it all together, right? Even if we're not on the financial committee.
Yep.
Absolutely. All of the application information is available to the committee members for their assigned applications.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay, well, obviously we did such a thorough job that there are no questions, so good on us. No, I'm only kidding. So moving forward, your chair of your committee will be, your primary contact person for questions. Although You're always welcome to contact me or Latina. We're happy to answer your questions or forward them on to the right person. You will learn a lot in your committee level orientation next week. So be prepared for that as well. You'll get a very good sense of how to use good grants, which will be wonderful. And then we will be, the grant application closes on January 30th at 11:59 p.m.
Mhm.
The fun begins.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for coming this evening. It's wonderful to see you all. We're really looking forward to the process and so happy to see returning and newcomers alike. It's just, I know you're going to find this process to be a wonderful process. It's just so, it's just great. And it's basically the heart of what we do. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Anne, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Sorry, I caught Anne off guard, sorry. Okay, so in any event, you will be getting the slides in the next day or two. Contact your chair if you have any questions. Otherwise, always feel free to reach out to myself or Latina. Oh, Anne.
Wait, I didn't realize I was on mute and that my video was off. No, I have nothing to add except we are very reachable. So I would just echo, you know, call Sharon, call Latina, call me. We're happy to answer questions, so don't hesitate. That's all I would say. And thanks all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.